All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a mystery that has literally baffled historians for centuries. We are looking at an ancient text known as the Mu Tianzi, or the Tale of King Mu. For the longest time, his epic Western journey has been viewed as this unsolvable puzzle. People wonder, is it just wild fantasy, or is it actually a remarkably accurate geographical cipher just waiting to be decoded? Well, today we are exploring a fascinating hypothesis that attempts to finally map this ancient adventure.
So, mainstream history usually tells us that King Mu's journey is a blend of some actual travels, maybe reaching Xinjiang in western China, but heavily sprinkled with pure myth. But there is a bold new hypothesis called the Siberian origin theory, and it argues something entirely different. It views the ancient text as a highly precise, factual survival log. The catch? The journey didn't happen in modern-day China at all. It happened entirely across Siberia and the Arctic Circle.
Here's our itinerary for today's ancient travelogue. We'll start with decoding the emperor's journey. Then we'll look at the Lina and Wangu. Third, Jishi, which are the Lina pillars. Fourth, Kunlun as Mount Narsdoya. Fifth, polar fishing at Jarzaz. And finally, Chongshan, the bear's claw.
Okay, part 1, decoding the emperor's journey. To really grasp this theory, we have to start with a pretty wild premise. What if the ancient world was actually located way, way further north? The Siberian origin theory proposes that the early centers of civilization were actually in eastern Siberia. Think about it. If you try to map ancient texts like the Mu Tianzi onto East Asia, it sounds totally mythical. The geography just doesn't work. But apply those exact same descriptions to the Siberian landscape, and suddenly it's like a giant puzzle where the pieces snap into place perfectly.
Moving right along to part 2, the Lena and Wangu. Let's actually track this journey exactly how the text lays it out chronologically. On days 1 through 5, King Mu departs from a place called Zhongzhou. He then crosses this massive body of water simply referred to as the river, before arriving to rest at a place called Wangu La Du. Let's see how the Siberian theory maps this to the real world.
Traditionally, Zhongshu is thought to be near modern-day Luoyang, but in this theory, Zhongshu is identified as a major civilization center right in eastern Siberia. So when the text says King Mu crossed the river, we're not talking about the Yellow River. We are talking about the massive Lena River, literally one of the longest in the world. And after a grueling crossing, the ancient text notes that the king rested at Wengju, which translates to Warm Valley. Well, that maps perfectly to the Nakoha Hot Springs, a famous geothermal area located right on the west bank of the Lena River. I mean, it makes perfect logical sense, right? If you're running an expedition in a freezing climate, you absolutely seek out a hot spring to recover.
Up next, part 3, Shishi, the Lina pillars. Now, this part is absolutely fascinating because it brilliantly illustrates the connection between the text and physical reality. The ancient text describes a place called Jishi, which means accumulated stones, and these are said to be the physical relics left behind by Yu the Great during his legendary flood control. The Siberian theory maps this directly to the Lina pillars. If you haven't seen them, they are absolutely massive, towering, jagged rock formations lining the banks of the Lena River. The text even specifically notes that King Mu reorganized his troops on the riverbank just south of these stone pillars. It's totally logical. Any ancient king would use a geographical feature that huge as a monumental rallying point.
Before we go any further, I just want to remind you how researchers actually arrived at these conclusions. They aren't just guessing. This entire theory is deeply rooted in linguistics and decoding the specific forms of ancient Chinese characters to extract geographical truths from the text. They are meticulously matching ancient character descriptions, tribal names, and geographical features directly to the physical and linguistic realities of the Siberian landscape.
All right, part 4, Kunlun and Mount Narayana.
So our progress bar is moving steadily westward now. Leaving those Lena pillars, King Mu's massive convoy crosses the vast, open expanse of the Great Steppe. Eventually, this long march brings them face to face with a formidable natural boundary, the Ural Mountains. For literally thousands of years, scholars have debated the true location of Kunlun, the mythical mountain home of the gods and the site of the Yellow Emperor's palace. Well, the Siberian origin theory points directly to Mount Ardnaya. Standing at nearly 1,900 meters, it is the highest peak of the Ural Mountains. In this ancient geographical system, the Urals represented the absolute western boundary of the world, literally the place where the sun sets. By mapping Kunlun to Mount Narodnaya, King Mu's journey to visit the Queen of the West suddenly has a precise, logical destination at the edge of their known world.
Let's keep moving. Part 5. Polar fishing at zoos.
The text gives us this incredibly vivid scene, saying, "The marsh of Zuza, 30 li square, fishing in the flowing water." Just picture that for a second. It's the middle of summer, but we're talking the short, intense Arctic summer. King Mu is standing by a massive, freezing polar river system, casting his line. It sounds super poetic, but the question is it biologically accurate? Get this. The theory actually locates this Zuz marsh at Lake Bolshoye Shuche, right at the northern foothills of Mount Narodna. The ancient text lists specific plants, like reeds and thorny shrubs, which perfectly, and I mean perfectly, describes the sedge, cotton grass, and dwarf Arctic willows that just explode across the tundra during that short polar summer. Even better, the text notes the locals presented the king with incredibly fatty and smooth fish. Well, if you fish in an Arctic lake, you are catching cold water species like Arctic char and Siberian omul, which are famous for their rich, fatty meat. The ecological match here is just stunning.
Finally, Part 6. Chongshan, the Bear's Claw.
The ancient travelogue says this. The emperor observed from atop Chongshan for 5 days. It claims it's the highest mountain in the world, taking time to plant seeds and leave a stone monument. But what, and more importantly, where, is Chongshan?
Okay, prepare for a total aha moment here. Just west of Mount Narodnaya is a peak with an incredibly distinct, jagged, sawtooth ridge. The ancient texts, including the classic of Mountains and Seas, describe the mountains in the specific area using the term picha, which means a bear's claw. Today, this real-world mountain is known as Mount Manaraga, and in the local indigenous languages of that region, Manaraga literally translates to bear's claw. I mean, no way, right? The indigenous name perfectly echoes the ancient Chinese description of the mountain's totally unique shape.
So let's bring this whole shebang together. When we look through the lens of the Siberian origin theory, King Mu's journey is no longer this confusing jumble of myths. We track him departing from Zhongzhou, a center in eastern Siberia, crossing the massive Lena River to rest at actual hot springs. We see him rallying troops at the towering Lena Pillars, marching across the steppe to the highest peak of the Ural Mountains, fishing for Arctic char in a tundra lake, and gazing at a mountain shaped exactly like a bear's claw. The dots connect flawlessly from east to west.
Which leaves us with a pretty provocative thought. Given this absolutely incredible alignment of geography, ecology, and indigenous linguistics, is the Mutanzijwan merely a collection of ancient myths? Or are we actually looking at a remarkably accurate 3,000-year-old survival and travel log from the Arctic Circle? It for sure makes you want to pull out a Mac and look at the ancient world in a whole new light. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning what you know.